Hello, everyone. It's Kate Stillman with the Yoga Healer podcast, and I have the honor of being here with Peter Block, who is the author of Community, which is the best book written on community. I was writing my newest book, Peter, called Wild Habits, and in Wild Habits, it's an update to a prior book I wrote on habits, on the habits of Ayurveda and yoga called Body Thrive, This Wild Habits book is really trying to help lead people out of conventional habits. And there's a habit in there called commune, and there's another section in the book on lead and becoming a leader, and I quote you extensively in the lead chapter. And what stood out to me most in that and in your work is the idea that where we can make a real difference is where we belong, and that belonging has to do with becoming an owner and a co-creator of that community. So that's really where your world and my world intersected. So welcome to the Yoga Healer podcast. For those who don't know Peter Block, let me just say a little bit more. You're not just in the world of writing books. You also have designed learning.com and Common Good CC and peterblock.com and designed learning. I'm super interested in your work there, your workshops, and your work with businesses and communities. So thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for the invite. I like being invited to strange places, unexpected places. That's what's appealing about you, is unexpected, even though, I have my own connection to yoga and all these kinds of things. We're all trying to figure out our lives.
Actually, I did want to start with that, because when I read, in chapter 7, the transforming community in your book, Community, the Structure of Belonging, what instantly strikes me is that, you're not my typical business book interview guy. So that strikes me. And the other thing, so I want to know about your holistic background, but I also want you to know that part of my strategy for business development at Yoga Healer for years, for maybe 5 years, has been a community of belonging and becoming. And that was really before I actually came across your book around the structure of belonging.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I've learned from the guys over at Mastering Leadership, Anderson and Adams, is some of their work with Ken Wilber, that structure precedes evolution. So if we don't have a structure for a community to evolve, then we can't expect a community to evolve.
Well, you don't have a community. You have a bunch of individuals coming together. And most of the spiritual world is very individual focused. And people say, be the change you want to be in the world, was Gandhi. And the message is, it's an inside out. You begin with yourself and then move out in the world. And my thought is that most of us get trapped at working on ourselves for a long period of time. And then when we go out into the world, we go out as individuals, evolved individuals. And part of my, the yoga studio that I belong to, I've worked with them on saying, well, there's a collective organism here, a collective being, and it has a mind and a soul and a qualities totally different than collecting individuals. And that's been the work for me. It was in businesses at first, and mostly it's creating an alternative narrative. You asked me, based on the first 6 minutes of our relationship, okay, what are you up to? You're trying to change a narrative of what it means to hold a life, have a life, be an agent to your own life. And why wouldn't you choose to stop being a consumer, okay, and start being a citizen or an agent? All the things you said. Yeah. And I, in yoga and in the healing arts, as an individual, I get that, and but we've stopped there. And we leave our healing and then we go shopping.
Yeah.
And it's not about buying things. That may be your only outfit, but it's the belief that I can outsource my own well-being. I could have a school raise my children. I can have the police keep me safe. the illusion that a doctor has an interest in my health. 15% of my health is medical profession related. The rest of it's kind of on me. A little bit of genetics and a little bit of action. And so you stand for reclaiming control of our ability to produce our well-being, period. And then we all have little windows into that. And that's why I'm happy to be with you.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah, I use very similar language about the pivot from consumer to creator and co-creator. What I have found I just want to tell you a little bit about how I sort of stumbled upon, when I read your book, I'm like, oh, I've learned this through my work. And when I started Yoga Healer 20 years ago, I was primarily working one-on-one. And then I started leading these groups through processes together and allowing the group to take on an identity and a name and to be part of it. I've been a student of collaborative leadership. And one of the things that I found in a lot of my academic and then holistic training and the holistic organizational training was that leaders didn't get out of the way enough. And one of the things I learned more in collaborative leadership was to let the structure, to really let the structure around the community bear the weight, rather than the weight being on me as the leader, and then I could get out of the way. And I was primarily in charge of the structure.
Correct.
And then others could move up and lead. Yeah. And that has just continually served the connection of the members, the connection of the organism.
And yeah, beautiful. Your social architect is one piece of language that I design experiences for people. I'm not a role model. I'm not a visionary. I'm not your mother, and I'm not your father. I'm not your priest. I'm not a paid pathway to God. Okay?
I'm not a paid pathway to God. Right.
Which every church and most, gatherings are. And so host is another word you can use sometimes. We're using the word leader as convener. That your job is to bring citizens together with each other, not with you. And so you don't ask people, how did I do? We're not in the entertainment business. It's not showtime, and most people in the spiritual world, once they adopt a guru, eventually it's a question of how long before they're disappointed.
Yeah, the pedestal.
They're human beings. Give them a break, know. And in the business world, it's the same thing. My boss is not my parent. I should not ask my boss, what do you have in mind for me? That agency is lost. I become a consumer. Consumerism isn't about shopping. It's asking other people to inform you about what your life should become. And that the one conversation of agency is when you say to your parents, I'm not the daughter you had in mind.
Yeah. So what were your influences? Because again, when I read, especially the whole structure of belonging, transforming community, I get a whole Eastern interconnected ecosystem of philosophy, right? Co-arising. So what were your spiritual influences, or where did that come in?
To me, my spiritual influences, my faith, there have always been placeholders for mystery. I was born a Jew, and I was so surrounded by Jewish culture when I was young, a kind of non-believing Jewish culture.
Yeah. Half of my side is the same. Non-believing Jewish culture, yes.
And so I didn't know I was a Jew until I got in high school, and people told me it was fine with them that I was. And so to me, the spiritual, I heard Rob Doss once in my late 20s, early 30s. He said that anybody can go to a monastery. Anybody can go to church on Sunday. He said, your real, where you'll find yourself is in the fire of the marketplace. I took that seriously. And so to me, my spiritual influences have been my people I ran across, like people run across you.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, my world was inverted. I heard one philosopher give a talk, and he said, if you're anxious, if you're lonely, if you're struggling, if you think there's something wrong with you, there's not. You're just a human being. I heard that in a 20-minute talk, and I thought, oh my God, I've been working so hard. I would read books on psychology, and every mental illness they identified, I identified with. And Gestalt therapy was huge for me. I loved it. Okay, that taught me how to say no. And then Peter taught me that I was just a human being. I was wounded at the moment of birth. Oh my God, suppose I took that seriously. That means I've constructed my life. Even my stories about my life, I made up. My mother this, my sister that, the world this, poverty, wealth. Those are all just stories. They're social constructions, they're narratives. And so as an individual, once I realized I made it up, then I'm free to make something else up, which is what you're in the business of. You put the word healing is to complete the story I had about my past. Don't overcome it. Don't gain insight from it. You're going to repeat it. It's just complete it. Say, oh, that's it. Son of a gun. I thought I was a gypsy. I thought I was an outsider. I thought I was a wandering Jew. I thought I was alone in the world. And then at some point in your life, you say, wow, I made that up. And that's when I got involved in communities. That's what shifted in me. In our game of tennis, Tim Galway, very Eastern. He teaches people how to play tennis without one stroke instruction.
Wow.
Can you believe that? And he says, here, hold this racket. Now hit a ball. What did you notice? Where in your body did you feel something? I mean, it's no different. He called it Zen tennis. Right? Where did you feel in your wrist? Where did the ball hit the racket? At 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, center. And you don't try to hit the ball. You just watch yourself hit the ball. And that's what you do with breathing, for God's sake. The breathing is the ball. So all these people, I read them and my life changed. You know, it took 5 or 6 or 7 years of being around them. First question was, where do you live? I'm coming to you. Is it okay? I'd pay him. I'd take jobs consulting because it was close to where Peter was or Tim was, John was. So, you know, you have people that, I don't know, every 7 years for me, even writing books is a way of completing something. I just write books to get them out of the way. Yeah. And so I could stop being haunted by this.
I hear you. Yeah.
And it's done. You know, you're always embarrassed. And you know every time you write a book that the fraudulent nature of your being will be exposed.
Yep.
You know, and so this is the tapestry of a life. And slowly over time, you realize it was your life all along. And if it's my life, then maybe I should pay attention to what
I just want to highlight I notice it's like if I notice in some ways, you know, if I simplify the world into like there's two groups of people, like people that do follow their desire, that follow the, you know, in Ayurveda we might say follow the Shakti or yoga, like follow that deep desire to learn, to know, to be with someone who knows more about something or who has a vibe or a perspective or a wisdom that we want. And so we're just drawn and it's magnetic and we go there. And then people who don't do that, who don't follow that, don't cultivate that. And there's sometimes better words in Ayurveda or yoga. There's this word tejas, which is like this, it's third eye power of discrimination towards desire. It's like this higher level desire to even know and go towards what you really, really want. And what I heard in your story is that you.
That and the people who don't are people who think they're alone. They think they're self-made people. Yeah. They think they're autonomous. And this culture loves individuals because they're easy to control.
Yeah.
And so what the politics of what you're doing and what we're doing is to say, if people find out they're not alone, I can't pursue any of these things on my own. I just can't. A friend of mine's a heart surgeon, and he doesn't want repeat customers. Okay, he's doing fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
And if they don't get in a group and stay in a group, he forces them into a group. They contract for 3 months. If they don't stay in a group, they're coming back.
Yeah. Yes.
And if you want to be sure you're not coming back, you run a group.
Yeah.
Lead a group.
So this, I have discovered in my work that, it's like communities evolve faster than individuals. Like individuals go really slow. So I stopped doing the one-on-one work years ago because I was like, well, it's going to slow us down to any results we want.
I know.
If you can be in one of my groups, we'll get to results. You'll meet people that will help you grow faster that you don't currently have in your life. So yeah, talk about why do groups evolve faster than individuals, or how does that work, and how are we so brainwashed against that?
I need to know I'm not alone. There's 3 things I got to figure out. I'm not alone. Okay, I don't care how lonely I am. I'm just not alone. The second is I'm not crazy. Half the time we think we're crazy. What am I doing in this world? And the people that are successful think they're crazy also. How did I get here? And the third thing is there's nothing wrong with you. Now, how do I find out there's nothing wrong with you? I need you to let me know that I have gifts to bring into the world. I don't have a clue what they are. Getting good grades means nothing. What you want is 18-year-olds everywhere to know what they're good at.
Yeah.
I can't find that out without you. I also can't find the language until I tell you what matters to me, really. And most of the work in that book is questions that evoke and allow people to tell each other what really matters. Where you're from, what you do for a living, how's it going? Those don't mean anything.
Yeah.
What opinions, left, right? I'm not divided. You and I are political activists with a stance in the world that says, I don't care what you tell me in the news and the media. I'm not divided. Everybody says we're divided. No, we're not divided. I'm messed up, but I'm not divided. And I'm a human being. And so what I've done lately is to say, how do you accelerate intimacy? And the questions you ask are accelerators. And so even with very sophisticated convener leaders, they still say, let's start this discussion by telling me what's your favorite hobby. I thought you wanted to know who I was. So I asked people when they first meet, okay, in a group of 3 or 4, not 8 or 9, 3 or 4, why was it important for you to be here today? Not what do you expect, not why did you come, all right? I want to know what matters to you. The one thing I've chosen, we choose in our lives, you've chosen in your life, Kate, is the commitment that you are. Okay, that didn't come from anywhere. You somehow you keep evolving in its language. And so you ask people, why was it important for you to be here today? If I can figure out why it's important for me to be here today, maybe I know why I was born. Because all it was a bunch of days.
Yeah.
A bunch of conversations like meeting you is. And another question is, what's the crossroads you're at this stage of your life? If I don't know I'm at a crossroads, then I've sacrificed choice. What you're doing with your work is confronting people with their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And none of us showed up for that. I didn't come for that. I know you didn't come for that. Now break into small groups and answer the following questions, comma. I won't finish it because this is being recorded. Okay. But another question, you say, what's the no that you keep postponing?
Yep.
I can't say no, yes means. So there are accelerating questions. that help us be personal without revealing anything about my history. But it allows me to be vulnerable in the moment. Like, that's the best part of our being together now, is to talk about our vulnerabilities, our doubts, and then our gifts. And I don't have a question. I need you, Kate. What's the gift you've received from me in the 30 minutes we're spending together today? If you don't tell me, I'll never know.
Right.
I'll never know. I'll have to die first. I know when I die, there'll be a eulogy. And people will tell me what I was good at, and they'll forgive me. I'm going to miss it. I won't hear it. And some of my friends now are having eulogies while they're still alive.
Good. Good.
It's too late. You need it from age 5 on.
Yeah.
So these questions, gifts, doubts. The other thing, when people complain, there's nothing more debilitating than complaining. Complaining is enormously satisfying and breeds a deep helplessness. Most of the protesting you hear in the world that you're an alternative to is waiting for someone else's transformation. You know, you wake up in the middle of the night and you think of all the ways your family members could be better.
So
these questions, certain questions confront people. If I answer them, I'm doomed. Okay, I'm guilty. I'm responsible for my life. There's good things called existential guilt, which means that I've chosen a life and a path, and I'll live with the consequences. And that's what you're doing with your work with food and lifestyle and health and well-being.
Yeah, and the whole questions, these accelerator questions, we use, are you familiar with liberating structures?
Yes.
So we use at all our live events and even on our line, we use liberating structures. And one thing I learned from the liberating structures community is exactly what you just said, which is like, frame the question, like get your questions right.
Make them powerful.
Make the questions powerful. And I mean, one of the things that I just want to highlight for the listeners is like what Peter is saying is so key. And I notice a lot of people who are, especially we coach a lot of wellness pros, and often they have a hard time making what I call making a group dynamic or a community dynamic. Like how do you activate the group? And we find that exactly what you're saying, like no small talk. You dive right in to what matters most. You frame questions around meaning. We use timers, and I really learned timers in 2 places: liberating structures, and then some speech skills training. And how that creates a totally different dynamic and a totally different experience, and it's so fast and it's so powerful. So my next question, I have so many questions, but my next question. After an experience like that, so if we do these for like 3 days, often we'll come together in different parts of the world and we'll do these for a few days. And it's so deeply transformative for people. And then they're like, how do I go back to the small talk? And in my experiences, you don't. But the hard part is then when you're around people who haven't had these experiences, then it's really up to the individual to bring that into their family or to bring that into their friendships. Yeah. So how do you do that?
Well, family is the hardest because we think we know each other. We don't. I have daughters that are 57 and 58 years old. I'm still trying to figure out who these creatures are. Okay. And it took me a long time before I even asked the question. I thought, and so families are hard. Do them last.
So it's because we have these assumptions about it and an identity.
I think I know you. I don't want to hear differently. And I have a stake in you. I've decided who you are. I've constructed you in my mind. Nothing to do with who you are, especially if you're waking up slowly. All right. And so it's hard. Now, it's good, but then everybody else, I meet you on the street and I can say, what are you doing here? Whatever we are we at an art thing? Are we at a restaurant? I say, why was it important for you to come to this thing? Why is it important for you to be in this circle? If you're in a church, why is it important for you to be here? If you're in a yoga circle and you ask people, what's the crossroads? It's not that, these are not complicated questions. We don't want to get too personal. I don't want to be too vulnerable. And so I don't know, it's too complicated to explain in less than 4 years. Okay. But and you ask people, what do you say yes to you no longer mean? And you just ask the question, and you talk about time. You get a group of people together, and it could be, I've done it with 4,000 people. Okay. And I start by saying, I'm your keynote speaker. If you expect to be inspired or motivated, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Okay. And then you talk for a while because you have to. And then you break them into small groups.
Yeah.
You break them groups of 3 and you ask them questions.
Yeah.
You come up with questions that allow people to fall in love in under 12 minutes.
Yeah.
How long does it take to fall in love? 12 minutes. And I've had people time and again. And it also, these questions keep life interesting for you and I. So if you're convening a group, how do you stay interested? I can tell when my yoga teachers are bored because they play louder and louder music. And so how do you stay vulnerable to you? And whenever I do a group, virtual or not, I join a small group. And when I ask them, what's the crossroads in your life? I tell them my crossroads. That's your version of leadership. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you find questions in context in which it works, and nothing works all the time. But I know if you get the question right, and that's what you do in your healing work and your training wellness people. The problem with wellness professionals is they think they're responsible for my wellness.
You're right. Agreed. Yep.
And I have to keep telling them I need them. I started working with a trainer, and he's got a methodology. Cool. And I said, let me tell you something. I don't want to get better. Okay. I'm in the 4th quarter. I just don't want to get worse. Okay. I don't want to be stronger. I don't want to walk across the room like you can. I'm never going to be able to reach my right foot and straighten my leg. Only in a hospital will I do that. But I'd like to reach. I'd like to be able to reach the little beyond my knee for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So it's very hard in a consumer culture where I came to you to give me something.
Yeah.
For you to show up and say, I didn't come here to help you. I came here to be with you and give you a pair of lenses and eyes to kind of see the narrative that you're living into.
Yeah. So I want to ask you this question that really pops out about when people feel lonely and want to be, or it's not even lonely. It's almost just like more of it's like busy and in the distraction of life where they're missing a component of purpose and meaning. And I love your orienting question about where can your goodwill make a real difference? Like, what do you want to, like, where should you belong next around where can your goodwill make a difference? And I am guessing that those words are very intentional around goodwill, around having something to contribute, around being willing. And there's these words in Sanskrit that are to some degree a little bit better, I find, than English, because good can mean so much, but there's these words that are associated as individual attributes of the divine, and this idea of goodwill is in there. Is in
the more sophisticated versions, even in the 12-step program, the 12th step is how do you bring this into the world? Okay, 11 steps, I'm working on my deficiencies and skipping my amends step and all that stuff. And, I think it's in there, but it's kind of disguised a little bit. It's not front and center, but I think, and it is, it's half the question is what do I care about in the world? What gives meaning to me? And then the bigger question is, and where do I find people? Not like-minded people. I want to find strangers who also, underneath it all, care about the same thing I do. And in the neighborhood work we do, there's certain things people care about. Raising a child. Why would I outsource that? And you can ask people, how many people in your neighborhood know your child's name? Okay, if they don't, then you're living in an unnecessarily isolated existence. And people care about safety. Well, you and I keep each other safe. You help people on a spiritual path create safety for each other. Okay, that's why sometimes you go to physical body classes, yoga class, and they want to help you. They come over and adjust you, save me from adjustments. Okay, I don't need to find colonization in a yoga class. Okay, and in my age and condition, I had one teacher who I really liked. She said, "Peter, I want you to notice that I don't come over to you because I figure you're doing what you do." I said, "Thank you." That's the most loving statement I've heard today. And so I need strangers to come with me that care about raising a child and being safe and care about the environment. There's only a certain number of things that are going to touch us, care about the most vulnerable people in the world. And then you find ways to be with them where you're doing with the world what you're doing with each other. And so when you work with people who have low incomes, all you talk about is what they're good at. I'm not interested in how many years of schooling you had. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how much you weigh. Mm-hmm. I don't care how you're spending your nights and evenings. We started a hip hop center. We didn't ask them any of those questions. Everybody, urban youth, 14 to 24, which is the age group that makes us nervous. Okay. And we say, what do you love to do? Well, I love hip hop. I love to make music. I lay down beats. I love to dance. I love to do graffiti on the walls. All right, why don't you come and do it here? And the question we ask them is, how many adults in your life have your best interest at heart? Most of them, the answer is 1, 0, 2. And if that number gets to 4 or 5, they leave the street culture.
They do what?
They leave the street culture.
They leave the street culture. Yeah.
They do what you're talking about, people living into an alternative story about who they are. That's how I frame what I'm aspiring to.
Yeah.
I'm working on that. That gives meaning. I keep asking myself, and you do the same. So now what? Now what? Without wanting to know what's next, it's just so, given the circumstances of my life, what are the choices I have and what matters the most to me? And sometimes it's going shopping, It's not, you're delightful, Kate.
Oh.
Because you care about what you're up to with an enormous intensity and ferocity. And that's a great gift. And you do that and listen at the same time. There's only 3 people in the world that can have that ferocity and listen at the same time.
Oh, I mean, life, right? Like my initial dharma was it was really all around climate change and global warming and one people, one planet. And then I left politics and policy work and went into human consciousness because that was a bit more of the answer. And where I've ended up is in human habits. That's really where I've landed, is in the habits that awaken people. And one of my core learnings and being devoted to this community that's grown around, that we've grown together at Yoga Healer is that our habits are not our own. that our habits are communal.
Beautiful.
And so what we find is that, and I'm curious about this concept of parallel cultures, that if say someone, this is what we find, if someone has a disease of chronic inflammation, whether it's an autoimmune disease or whether it's diabetes or, name any of the chronic inflammation diseases, they're most diseases, lung disease, kidney disease, heart disease, etc. That if they join our community, they're leveraging the momentum of what this community has already created together, what it's oriented around, and that vulnerability, that's the first thing they notice. So it's online, right? It's been global online for forever. The first thing they notice is the vulnerability, and they weren't expecting it. They're expecting me to be kind of like a typical teacher that lectures and tells everyone what to do and how to behave.
A cheerleader.
Yeah, cheerleader and a professor.
Okay.
Right? That mix. And instead what they experience is intense vulnerability, not just with the other members, but with the mentors and with myself. And that it's a little, it's disarming, but it's also a little bit unsettling at first to be like,
Yes.
this is, and it's so real, right? There's no fluff, and it's that realness. And so the part of co-creativity to me that's so important, that I just love this, and I just want to pull a quote from you around this. The communal possibility rotates on the question, what can we create together? This emerges from the social space we create when we're together. It's shaped by the nature of the culture within which we operate, but isn't controlled by it. The question of what we can create together is at the intersection of possibility and accountability. And so when I reflect on this, I'm like, we sort of are, that's what we're doing. Because people come in and they have whatever disease they have is supported by habits, if it's chronic inflammation oriented, even if there's a genetic underlying tendency that opts towards that disease, it's still in my book, it's a habit, it's a lifestyle habit, diet, orientation that's reinforcing the atmosphere, or even you could say the cellular community within the physiology to opt towards disease versus ease. So they come into our Body Thrive community and they experience possibility, and then they see through the vulnerability oriented towards growth, not vulnerability oriented towards safety or oriented towards staying in the same place, but oriented towards growth, right? It's vulnerability, but it's oriented towards becoming. So you belong, but you're becoming. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's a distinction between problem solving and possibility. Okay, you don't bring them in they come in wanting to be better at solving the problem.
Yeah.
And you confront them with the fact that they're a possibility. And I don't care what portion of my dis-ease I can influence. I take it. And I asked a friend of mine who's a diet, and I said, when is it too late? And he said, well, if you have 3 minutes to live, get going.
It's my kind of guy.
Yeah. And if you knew you're going to die tomorrow, would you plan a treat today? That's what you're offering. And I can't do that without you. I can't do that on my own. I can't do it by reading. I can manage the virtual. So we do groups, and you do small groups all the time. You can have 300 people and break them into groups of 3. And when they're with each other, their life is touched. The other thing I wanted to say in the middle of the wisdom that you're naming is that people are disarmed. We have our own story about ourselves, but they need to be able to pass. And so every time we do this, we say, here's a question. The purpose of the question is to make you anxious. They're anxiety provoking, they're personal, and they're ambiguous. Well, what do you mean by that question? And I say, good point. And if you don't want to answer, just say, I pass. It doesn't cost you a thing. But you came. You're in a circle. You don't have to earn your right to be here. All you had to do is show up. And I felt that for years, that if people showed up, I don't care what jerks they were. I don't care if they get mad at me.
Yeah.
Because I'll take, another quote I love from Peter Kestenbaum was, I'm warning you now, if you argue with me, I'm going to take your side.
That's incredible. I've never heard that.
And that captures the spirit in which we show up. And if you say no, if you don't want to do it, thank you. Somebody had to say no. It turned out to be you this time.
Yeah.
Somebody had to pass. And so that way your activity is not coercive.
Yeah.
Consensus forces people to lie.
We
can move ahead if three of you think what we're doing is the stupidest thing in the world. Thank you for that. We're going to do it. Okay. And we want you to be part of it. Stay in the circle, even though you believe in what we're doing. That's why we need you.
I call it lurking. Like it's okay for people to lurk and attune, because there's an attunement, and then it's fostering a readiness, and then it's like a ripening, and then there's transformation.
And who are we to say? And I don't have to know where I am on that scale.
Right.
And that's not a scale of progress. It's a scale of, you would call it evolution. It's a scale of, coming to terms with who you are and what you want to be in the world. Maybe you do it backwards.
Yeah.
It's not 6 steps,
Yeah.
And you can't engineer your future. It's an emergent. And what you invite people to do is watch and to deepen their experience. And so you substitute depth for speed. How long does it take? Lifetime. Okay, I'm in the 4th quarter. So what? And it's been hard for me to adjust to that. The number of my years was way outsizes my experience of myself. But then get off it, Peter. Grow up. Jesus Christ. I was whining when I was 30 and 40 and 50. Quit whining.
So the depth and speed question, I mean, this is like one of the wormholes with time as well, because when there's that level, right, of vulnerability and connection and meaning, then so much can happen so fast as well.
What does time mean? It's a construct. I'm in a dentist chair, and 5 minutes seems like a lifetime. I'm watching a wonderful movie, and please don't end, And so time is a construct also. It's a long time. So speed is an escape from everything you stand for, okay? People are in a hurry. You're in a hurry. Don't talk them out of being in a hurry. Hey, when do we get to the good stuff? Good question. I'm wondering the same thing myself. You just don't, counter resistance every minute of every day, and you don't embrace it. You just allow it. Good point. This is bullshit. Good point. I know.
Yeah.
And now break into small groups, have this conversation, or pass. And it's too simple. What you are doing, it's too simple to embrace. I want brain research. Come on, baby. Give me the data.
I just spent 6 months looking up the data. There is the data.
I know.
But we don't need to know it. I mean,
it's fine.
Yeah.
If it's helpful to one person, it was worth 6 months of your life.
It was worth it.
It was worth it to you. You had the energy to do that for 6 months. Thank you. No.
That made me smarter. So I just want to emphasize what you're saying, because when people feel, I think with all the, and I do want to get into this bit, and I know we're already over the time I asked you to spend, so if you need to go, I get it. people, what I'm noticing in today's culture, after isolation and with the corporatization of media and the fear mongering and messaging, and what that, just in terms of like what that does emotionally, it creates chronic inflammation. So emotional inflammation creates chronic inflammation, which creates disease. And a lot of people feel like they've kind of given up on meaning. They've kind of given up on that their life matters, or that what they could possibly do, that the problems of the world are too big, problems on the planet are too big.
Those are symptoms of my isolation. The problems in the world were too big in 1704, in 1869, in 1942. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, the world's more complex. It's not complex. It's just you're alive now. And so you magnify its difficulty. And so sure, there's things going on in the world and the narrative, but I have to find how to live within that, whatever the world has. In your case, and you said, emotional stress creates, inflammation creates disease. They're all diseases. My emotional stress is a disease. I can't separate it. That's the beauty of what your breathing technology does, of what your consciousness technology does. Is at every stage, there's a way to live into that. And when people say I'm helpless to change the world, then I say, what about your neighborhood? Save me from globalization. I need to know what's going on in the world, kind of, but why would you watch the news? Why would you spend an hour unless you had a stake in things not working out? And so live a life of walking distance. That you can make a difference in. I was going to write that book on community. My wife, she said, Peter, don't you think you should experience it before you write about it? That was a radical thought. And I thought, good point, comma. And everything you need, you can walk to. And it's called right livelihood, carry water, all that language tells you can get everything you need in walking distance. And tell me why you can't do something about that.
Yeah.
Oh, and so I just don't, I hear the helplessness, but I don't want to participate in it.
Yeah. And that's really what I found is that when working with members that are really there, is it's like the first thing is just like take the news app off the phone, take the Netflix off get off these subscriptions, like pay attention to where you're pointing your attention.
It's an attention economy. And that's part of being a consumer is to believe I need to be entertained, or I can use a flat screen to produce the mood that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Whether the mood is darkness and science, it doesn't matter. And you're right, it's a distraction. My philosophy friend, he says, why would I let somebody else decide what I pay attention to?
Right.
And it doesn't matter. Just watch 1 hour a day less. Okay. I mean, your habit focus is beautiful. It's perfect. And, your habits probably don't go away until you choose them.
Exactly. Yeah. And until you're aware of what you're already choosing and how that's affecting you.
Hard. That's why I need support groups. That's why my surgeon needs a group, so he doesn't have to cut again. Otherwise, you can't sustain it on your own. And every addict knows that. Every addict thinks they can handle it.
Yeah.
With the illusion that I can take just one drink, I can take just one snort. And it's their isolation is a part of their struggle. That's why it's so hard. And the things that work simply overcome isolation.
Yeah.
And once you discover that you're not crazy and you're not alone, and there's nothing about you that needs fixing, wow, then the habits become a nightmare and impossible to change.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome. See you
Will you
again.
will you come back?
Sure.
I have more quotes to read from.
Okay, I'll come back. I'm busy tonight, but how about tomorrow?
Sure, we could do it in a month or two.
Anyway, you're delightful, Kate. Thank you. I will find you and find out what you're up to, because it's rare for people with your belief system to value the community.
Oh, but we have the words for it though, right? I mean, we've got Sangha and Kula. It's just I was lucky. I was lucky that in one of the yoga training communities I was in, they really emphasized community. He didn't know how to build the structure for people to rise, but he did understand that teaching, and I grabbed that part and ran with it.
You've exploded it. And most of those things are people in a group working on their inner self. Okay.
Yeah.
Where you're saying, I want to start with the circle and find out who these people are. And you got to let them know ahead of time, because most people come with their mat and they don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe before and after.
Yeah.
But you could say, well, this is outside in.
Yeah.
They're both true.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.